I'm a cancer researcher and have been for more than a decade. I have a research team here at the University of Newcastle and Hunter Medical Research Institute. I was enjoying a successful career, and in 2018 my eldest daughter Josephine was diagnosed with a brainstem tumour called diffuse intrinsic pontine glioma. I was here at work actually on a Saturday morning writing grants for leukemia projects, and my wife rang me, who's a general practitioner, and she told me that she was very worried about our daughter Josie because she was refusing to walk. And I thought, well, maybe she's got a virus like her little brother George had had. At about 11 o'clock on that Friday morning, her intuitive educator Sarah rang me from across campus and said Josie was uncharacteristically clumsy. And I kind of felt that there was something not quite right, so I rushed across campus and picked her up. And the next morning I got up really early and came in here, and that's when Phoebe rang me about 9:30 and met her and her dad Chris, who's also a general practitioner, and Josie in the emergency department. Unfortunately that day there was a senior consultant neurologist on that both my wife Phoebe and her dad Chris knew quite well, and he shared in Phoebe's and Chris's worries and scheduled Josie for an MRI. Our world really crumbled when Phoebe and I were sitting outside of surgical recovery. The head of neurology, who had ordered the scan, was accompanied by the head of paediatric oncology. He revealed the scan to us and told us that it was DIPG and that it was terminal. Josie would have less than 12 months to live, and the only recognised treatment was palliative radiotherapy, 6 weeks of radiotherapy, each under a general anaesthetic, and we would have to move to Sydney for that treatment. And so we moved to Sydney for biopsy, for radiation, and unfortunately Josie didn't respond to radiation like she was meant to. She continued to do poorly. We had another MRI and the tumour was huge. It was just a big mess. Phoebe and I were ushered into conversations about palliative care, whether we would resuscitate Josephine or not if she needed it. Just a conversation that sticks with me every day. You know, I'm a fighter, and when we were delivered that diagnosis, given my field, I thought, this is ridiculous. We must be able to develop treatments. I contacted the world's leading DIPG researcher in the US, and that very day, which is days after diagnosis, she sent all of her tumours that she was growing in her lab, and we're figuring out how we grow these things, what we can do with them, and then we just subjected them to the same kind of research pipeline that we do for leukemia. We knew that these tumours were the worst of the worst. Single therapies were never going to do much against this tumour, so we've always been focused on challenging the tumours with, you know, rationally designed therapies, and then measuring what happens when the cells are exposed to these drugs, and then finding another therapy to combat that approach. And that's an approach that we've successfully been able to get into clinical trials now. We started a clinical trial about a year after Josie was after she died, a trial that Maddie was enrolled on for 12 months, a trial that has 136 other children currently enrolled. Patients are doing better, but it's still unacceptable. Children are dying in less than 2 years, 18 to 20 months. As a community, we need to do better. We need to work together and collaborate and pool our resources and try and figure out what the best way is to treat this terrible disease. I mean, funding's a problem in all science in this country, which is really hard to fathom, considering we're meant to be an educated nation. You know, particularly for these types of cancers that are considered rare. You know, they don't have the spotlight shine on them like other cancers like breast and prostate and other types of common. So we've had to turn to philanthropy for the most part to fund our work. When Josie was diagnosed, you know, I didn't have any funds to do the research, and I had to pay staff and purchase all the expensive stuff that's needed to do cancer research. And so we started a charity called Run DIPG, and it was a bunch of middle-aged people, very average runners, just trying to do whatever we could to raise awareness and raise funds. And our charity's been hugely successful. We've raised $3 million since Josie was diagnosed. We're really trying to push the federal government to contribute to DIPG research. But we need a huge injection, you know. This disease is diagnosed in a child in Australia every 2 weeks, and these kids are given 12 months to live. There is very limited funding for medical research in this country, and there are cancers and other diseases that we can do something about. And so I suppose DIPG is lumped into the basket of of hopelessness, really. You know, there's not much we can do. It's a death sentence for those 20 to 25 children that are diagnosed each year. And that's absolutely true because we haven't invested any substantial funding into it. Only 11 years ago this year, the mutation that causes the disease was discovered. So, you know, our fundamental understanding of the disease is way behind, but thanks to these brave parents who start foundations in memory of their lost child, the research that we've been able to do and the research that's happening from around the world is really rapidly catching up to these other diseases. And that'll only happen if one, parents stay motivated to fundraise and to turn sausages at Bunnings and to run marathons and to do whatever they can. And if the federal government can at least match that or even go beyond that and contribute, that would mean that, you know, other talented researchers and medical doctors and oncologists would be attracted to the field because they knew that there was funding to do their work. And then we would bring in some of the best of the best. I think that should just be a national priority. I think we should work together until there's at least some recognised protocols so that when a family is tragically diagnosed, their doctor isn't left with the terrible words that we don't have any treatment. I kind of feel like at the moment we're kind of scrapping for money. We've lost the importance of working together. I just think we need to change that, and the only way really to change that is to have good funding structures. We've got a great following on our charity run DIPG. We are very active in advocacy. We hold many events which fundraise, and like I said before, we fundraise and we fund research around the world. Speaking about the disease is probably the most important thing. Everybody should know that there's a cancer out there that takes more children than any other, that it doesn't have a treatment. Yeah, I suppose the first milestone that we really need as a community is we need effective drugs that prolong survival. Donations are critical. You know, when Josie was diagnosed, we got 8 different patient donations shipped, as I mentioned before, from Michelle Mongi's lab at Stanford. And I think at the moment in our lab, we've got about 95 different patients' donations. Some are biopsy, and most of them are when the child tragically passes and their courageous families decide that they would like their child to be part of the future solution. And without those donations, you know, we don't have anything to work on. So they're critical. She was just a great little human, very caring. She went to hell and back many times throughout her journey, but she was always happy, which is remarkable. And, you know, I can't imagine going through what she went through and doing it with such grace and courage.